Thank you very much. Item 16, Redcliffs Transport Project, Redcliffs School Transport Safety Requirements. All right, so there is some advice around item 2 in the resolution. Advocates to the New Zealand Transport Agency for the 30-kilometre school speed zones in line with other slow speed zones in the city. Apparently there's some additional staff advice on that matter, if we can take that advice first of all.
So the advice that has gone through to yourselves is we have provided, broadly provided advice. The end of that is that there's nothing, our advice is there's nothing to stop council advocating for a 30-kilometre speed limit around school speed zones in particular. However, we consider you would need to form a view on that. There would need to be some work done in order to allow you to form that view. And NZTA would need to consider it in a national context, so it's quite a substantive piece of work, and at the moment we do not have the capacity to do that reporting work for you.
So what we're saying is that if we were to pass that resolution, there isn't the staff resource available to give effect to it.
Richard might.
Can I say what it might be is that we're asking NZTA to look at doing it, and they would do the work involved in doing the assessment and stuff, not that we would do all of that work. And I'm actually aware that they're already starting to look at it, so it would be just good for us to,
Yeah, Richard?
Yeah.
So, Mr Chair, at the moment the speed limits around schools are set at 40 k's an hour, and it would be quite a significant change within Christchurch and within the country if those were to be changed to 30 k's an hour, because at the moment we'd have to go in and go around all those schools and change the signs, change the road markings, and there'd be quite a bit of cost to it. Well, yeah. So we don't know how much that would cost, so for the council to form a view as to whether they want to advocate for that, we think we'd need to do some work and look at the costs and benefits of that, and come back to you with a paper recommending whether we think that's a good thing for you to advocate. What we're saying to you is we haven't done that work. While on the face of it might seem like a good thing, we haven't done that work as yet, and our concern is that advocating for that without the work being done is a bit premature. And so it's simply that we'd need to go away and do it, and it would be a reasonably substantial piece of work.
And what I heard before is that we don't have the resources to do that work immediately. Not immediately,
no. And we think it would be quite a significant piece of work to actually look into it, because I just don't know what the costs would be, and we wouldn't want to give advice to the council to advocate for a change without knowing what the costs would be, because the cost could be, well, we just don't know.
All the benefits of
it. So that's our concern about it. On the face of it, it seems like a good thing, and we're all for safety and slower speeds around schools, but and in other parts of the city. It's just that at the moment it's set and gazetted at 40 kilometres an hour, and you know, that was an initiative that actually came from Christchurch City Council some time ago, and became something that was accepted across the country. But to change it would need to be something that was changed via Gazette by the New Zealand Transport Agency, and you know, there would need to be a lot of thinking that was put into it.
Well, we would also need to have regard to what the benefits might be of a 30k speed limit versus a 40k speed limit.
Correct.
And the amount of work that would need to be done to achieve the 30k speed limit, if indeed there were significant benefits to the implementation of 30 rather than 40 as a result of that national policy change that you were talking about.
That's correct.
Okay, this has been helpful advice, so thank you for that. So, still in questions, Sarah?
My understanding is that there's been substantial work done on the difference between 30 kilometres an hour and 40 kilometres an hour, especially when it comes to slow speeds. So, for example, today we just decided that 30 kilometres an hour was an appropriate speed through Woolston Village, and yet not outside the local school. And when you're looking at the vulnerability of the people and the crossing of the road. And also we've decided that 30 kilometres an hour is a better speed for safety reasons in the central city. And one of the things we get quite a lot as councillors, and we've heard it around the table, is that people come, they put submissions in saying, why make the central city 30? Why make St Asaph Street 40 when it's okay? Why make it 40 instead when it's okay for 40 outside of school? That's something that this council has discussed before. There was a previous council resolution where we looked at getting advice on asking government to change it to 30 instead of 40, and that was when I was a board chair. I'm not quite sure why that work didn't get done, because our board asked for it at the time. Yeah, but I would say that the significant benefits that we've already been presented with from staff of 30 over 40, that work's been done. It's just the costs and implementation that we're worried about. Is that right?
There's been work done, yes.
Yeah.
But as we've explained, as Richard's explained,
Yeah.
it's...
How about if we were just saying...
Back to the resolution, it says asks council to advocate to NZTA.
But
we
council
believe
can
you
change,
need to do some work.
Yeah. So if we were to say advocate to NZTA to do the work to assess whether a change should happen, would that be wording that would comfort you more, so we weren't doing the work that NZTA would be?
We still think you need to do work as a council in order to put that.
So if we were to change this resolution to, if there were a desire to do so, to request staff to provide advice on whether the council should advocate to NZTA, what we're being told is that there's insufficient staff resource to deliver that work in a timely fashion. If we pass that resolution, I mean, clearly you've provided the advice. If we were to pass that resolution, that would then mean that we were wanting to prioritise that work over other work. I'm just at a little bit of a loss to know how to proceed, because if we're saying that we need advice before we can just go straight to advocating to NZTA, but then we're saying that the ability to provide that advice in a timely fashion isn't there, we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place if we actually want to do something about this. All right, so we've received the advice that we've received. I mean, that is the advice. The facts are that there's a process we need to go through, and there's limited resource available to prepare us to do that.
That's correct.
And yeah, I mean, what I'm getting a sense of, we can ask the questions in as many ways as we like. We're going to continue getting the same answer.
That's
yeah.
correct.
All right, so continuing with questions, Anne.
I'm just interested, with the 40k zone around schools, when did we start bringing that in?
Since 2000.
Right, so it's been there for a while, and we're still rolling that out, aren't we, in terms of, you know, areas, new suburbs, and new communities. Yes. So if we were to change a speed zone around a school, what could you see the perhaps issues with that in terms of the public and managing situations, in terms of changing things that have been embedded for a while, in terms of people's perception of speed zones around school? I mean, what I'm trying to get at is that I guess that we're trying to get a blanket rule around schools so that people know when they're approaching a school, they know that it's 40 k's. That's been in place since 2000. We know how difficult it is to change. What effect would have to put in to make a new rule for a school to be 30k? Do you think?
Yeah. So we're not saying that 30k is a bad idea. We're just saying that we'd need to do some work to investigate it, and that would be, well, you know, what are the consequences of that, and what are the costs associated with it. So yes, there's always a bedding in period when you do these sorts of things, and you know, you'd need to advertise it and make sure that people were aware of those changes before you put it in place. But there might be some benefits to it, because as Councillor Templeton has noted, we do have 30k's in other parts of town, so we do have a real inconsistency where you've got 50, 40, 30. So all we're saying to you is that it's not necessarily a bad idea, we just haven't done the work to work out that we could give you the advice to say this is something that should be advocated for by this council, and our view is that we should, if you want us to, we'd need to do that work and come back to you with some advice on it. That's all we're saying. So,
what if we were to simply request NZTA to do that work? So request NZTA to review the likely costs and benefits of 30 km/h school speed zones. And that means that we're not asking our own staff to do anything, but we're asking NZTA to do that piece of work.
we can always ask, and personally I don't think there's too much harm in asking for them to do it. All we're saying is we don't know what the consequences of that might be for us because we haven't done it ourselves.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So, Aaron?
Yeah, so, Richard, I do heed your warning around good governance being that you wouldn't make a decision where you've got no idea what the cost would be, because it would be in the millions, I'm picking, to switch. Potentially, it might only be thousands to repaint hundreds of roads and change hundreds of signs.
I honestly don't know what the cost would be. So
would it not be wise to just get even a memo or something back on an estimate of what it might be to do that investigative work, or not? Before we advocate, so that way, because if it's got to become an annual plan or an LTP item, would that not be the way forward? Without doing all the work first, you kind of...
Sorry, what was the question? You're asking for us to do a memo?
To come up with an estimate of what it likely, a range of what it might be.
So look,
rather than an in-depth investigation and a quote on every single sign.
Yeah.
Maybe Dave here is signalling that he wants to provide some advice.
The same team that would put this information, or the same team that does all that kind of speed limit stuff around, they'll do over 200 reports to you a year at this point in time. And when I say to you community boards and whatever, they are writing a lot of reports. And so we would have to take them off actual projects delivering things to do this report. Even if we asked NZTA, I would suggest they would have to come back to get the information from every local authority to find out how many of these speed zones, because it's your resolutions that put those into place. And so that would come back and they would send to my team and say, tell me how many you've got and what are they there, how many streets. And you can see even the one we've done today on the 30Ks, there's, I'm not sure, there's probably about 10 thresholds to that safety speed, and each road for a street, for a school would be different because of the what. So there's a bit of work, even if we asked NZTA to do it. At the end of the day, if that's your top priority, because I do think you have to say, if we dropped them to 30, how many lives would it save? What would it save? All the rest of it. No doubt in our minds that 30 is safer than 40, and we've got that, and 40 is safer than 50 and all the rest of it if you have an accident. But also you've got to then look at that behaviour. So I think either way will put some pressure. Now, we've got no problem if that's the priority you want, but recognise other things may take a little longer to deliver, and it will slow down some projects because those are the people that have got that expertise that we roll out to you, the same people week in, week out. So does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful advice. Thank you very much. So, Aaron, does that answer your question, or did you have a specific answer you were looking for outside of that?
Well, it kind of does and it doesn't, but because we don't get to... it's obvious that I'd much rather be hit at 30 than 40. And I'm sure people would rather if their child was able to get hit that it was that, because you might ran through the numbers recently and it's an exponential scale. Yeah. So we have 30k an hour for adults in the city and 40 outside schools, and no one can understand that. So it makes sense for us to advocate. But if there's a problem with advocating because we don't know the cost, then we need to just find out a basic cost of what it might be so we know what we're advocating for. Because if it's one child's life saved, that's got a value of about $3 million. We're probably into some
comments that would be more appropriate in debate. Is there a question that still needs to be answered, or?
yeah, it can. I mean, is that a way? Let's just find a way forward. So, because I think you find the majority of the council would rather that. How do we get to the outcome rather than get so caught up in the process? There's a question for everything we do.
Phil.
I'm trying to clarify this in terms of actually process, and I'm going to ask the staff. Like, there's a suggestion that we could ask NZTA to do this work, but I just want our staff's view about whether, in fact, that's helpful in terms of our jurisdiction and what NZTA's likely response is, or would we be better to perhaps, as a council, decide to advocate to NZTA? I'm just really asking you about who should we be asking to do this work and how?
Well, I think by asking NZTA, you're advocating in a sense for this, and you're asking for the work to be done. That's a possible approach. The only concern we have is we don't know what that would throw up. And, you know, say they did come up with a response was, yep, it's got to be 30. That would have quite far-reaching implications for us and the country. But, you know, they would need to go through a process to you know, come up with a decision around that. But jumping back to the original resolution, our concern was really just we haven't done the work to give you the advice that this is necessarily a good thing to do. The concern I'd have about coming up with a brief estimate of costs is that quite often those are wrong, and we haven't fully, if we do things in haste on something which is this significant, we might undervalue it and come up with something which is incorrect, and then find out the full suite and range of costs is far more into the future. So I'd personally be a bit hesitant about us doing something really quickly and it not being correct.
Thank you. Sarah.
A couple of points. Firstly, when I look at some speed zones around the city, there's no road markings to be redone. It's purely the signage, so that would be cheaper. But also, it's been really clear, I think, hasn't it? There's a question, but a no there. That the government's been focusing on speed reductions as its initial best bang for your buck when it comes to road safety. Is that right?
That's certainly one of the things that they're focusing on. They're certainly focusing on road safety as a key priority of the GPS, and slower speeds are definitely a ways for achieving that reduction in fatalities and DSIs. And Mary, probably one for you. We've lobbied to government or advocated to government and various agencies quite a few times this term off the back of other reports on various things such as banning plastic bags, those kind of things. Have we ever, in any of those ones, sought extensive work and advice from staff before we've advocated, or have we just gone, hey, listen, actually, we think it's a good idea, let's advocate and see what they come up with?
So most of the ones that I'm aware of, but I can't remember, is that you have got a staff report that actually puts forward a submission or puts forward advocacy position to you. So that decision comes with a report from council officers, from my recollection. But I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that fully. You can't rely on that. It's happened 100% of the time, so it's only based on recollection.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Just a question with regards to if you were going to look at changing the speed limits, do you have a ballpark of how long that work would take if you made that a priority? 6 months, 8 months, a year, 18 months?
A couple of years. No, look, I honestly don't know, because we'd have to do some work and scope it out, and as David said, we'd need to drag people off the day-to-day projects because they're the ones with the expertise to do it. But we haven't really given it too much thought as to how much work there'd be in it. I think there might be quite a bit, but we haven't scoped anything out as yet. Stefan's just handed me a note, and he said he's meeting with the Ministry of Transport on Tuesday about speed management, and he can certainly raise the issue with them then. So, but that's just as an aside.
If I could just, second question, if that is happening, Stefan, could you also, look, if we're going to look at not so much ward protection in a sense, but the two schools on hills, which are Keshmere, which, yeah, protection I suppose, but also Mount Pleasant, the physics are and facts are that cars travel faster downhill than they do up. And although the reverse of that is they go slow uphill, but if you see the boy races on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday and now Wednesday nights, and the majority of the accidents are actually with them travelling uphill, obviously not school times because they generally get to school, I suppose. Yeah, that would be a really good thing to add too, because if we're going to look at these 30k areas, I think the schools on hills should be a priority.
So just to recap on your comment there, Richard, Stefan has got the ability to raise this in that meeting that was referred to, regardless of any resolution that may or may not be passed in this meeting today.
That's correct.
Thank you. Right, okay, we've got a whole raft of questions coming up. So, Aaron, Phil, Yanni, Vicky.
So quite a simple one, Richard. Since we have a central core which is 30k, people seem to have got used to it, a couple of speed bumps getting there. Places like the Woolston Village, makes sense, 30k. Can Christchurch lead the way across the country and just say, outside every single school, going forward, we're going to move to 30k now? Because we've done it in villages, we've done it in the centre of town. Can we do that? Is there anything stopping us legally from just going to 30k outside every single school and being consistent?
At the moment, the Gazette notice is 40k across the country.
So that legally stops us from us saying 30. So you'd go past St Anne's School doing 40k an hour, but then you'll reduce speed to go past the adults at 30k. So we can't create that consistency by making every single school 30. Legally, can we or not?
Let's get an answer from staff if we can, please.
So the national standard variable speed limit past schools is 40k an hour, approved under New Zealand Gazette.
And is there a follow-on to that paragraph that says, and no council anywhere can vary away from this and make it any slower?
It's my understanding...
Because if that's the case, then the schools in the slow zone should be put up to 40 outside them.
Let's get an answer from staff to this.
Stefan, I'm not sure of the legalities around it.
So to change the speed limit outside every school to 30 k's, you'll need to change the environment so it's a matching environment. So the variable speed limit's a little bit different because that's we have the ability to put the variable 40 speed limit outside schools without necessarily changing the environment, but for it to be 30 it would have to be the appropriate environment. So that would be engineering costs as well.
Heads up to all the motorists, the environment is a school. So, and the signs and the little kids running around is a giveaway.
All right. I've got Phil, Yanni, Vicky, and then back to Sarah. If we can keep the questions absolutely focused on the matter that we're dealing with, and if we can avoid questions that just see us getting the same advice that we've already got. As I said earlier, we can ask the question in as many ways as we like. We're likely to get the same response if it's the equivalent question. Phil.
So, because there's a lot of complexities to this, I'm just wondering, would it be helpful to you as staff and perhaps for us in governance if we were to ask for you to have a workshop around this whole area and then perhaps ask for a report? Would that be a clearer process in your view?
Look, we're more than happy to facilitate a workshop if that's the request of council.
All right. If that results in any sort of amendment or something that somebody wants to move, let me know. Yanni.
So I just want to be clear, okay, I know the wider issue, but could we just approve under 1A, just 30k? Like, we could just make that decision now? And if not, why not? Sorry, just one, sorry, not 1A.
So if
we're slowing the environment down, we're doing basically identically what we've just done in Ferry Road through Woolston, effectively putting little things here and there, and so just
So if we were to change the 40 to 30 and remove the word school zone?
I think we'd have to do some work. One, I'd have to go back and check what we consulted on, so there would be a question around that. Two, I think we'd have to check to see it met the requirements of the speed management guide. So, and three, again, while you might be able to do that if all those things were ticked off, I guess our advice is that we'd want to do the work on it prior to
So
giving
just,
you advice on it.
Thank you. Just the second question is following on from doing the work. When the main road plan was adopted, there was a 6-month review once the traffic lights had gone in for the supermarket around parking and speed. And I just wanted to check if we've done anything in that regard, or what we've reviewed in terms of the traffic through there.
I'd have to check and come back to you on that, Councillor.
It sounds as though if we were to take that approach, it would require leaving the matter to lie on the table until you'd done the work that would be required to come back with some advice. Okay, next question, Vicky.
Aaron, actually.
All right. So, Dave, you're wanting to provide some further advice.
The Gazette notice from NZTA gives us the authority, gives you the authority to set variable speed limits at 40 k's. Anything outside that needs their specific approval.
Yeah.
So basically, if you want to, you can let this lie on the table, which I'm not sure that's what we'd recommend, but we may be able to have but we could, I just wonder whether you refer it to the issue committee and we provide that through the advice and come back. But you've got to recognise it might slow down some of our other projects to do that.
Indeed.
It's quite a complex thing. I think we need to take some legal advice and come back with a whole picture. It's not something that I would be saying to you want, and it's, I don't actually think it's fair necessarily asking the staff a whole pile of questions because there's a whole pile of officials. But the Gazette notice actually specifically says local road controlling authorities, which is what you're acting in this thing, can set variable speed limits for schools at 40. Other than that, it does recognise that lower speeds are better in that notice, but it does not give you, as a road controlling the authority to set them at a lower level. You can, I think, and I'd need some legal advice on that, go to them and ask them if you want a specific. One of the problems they have is there's got to be, they feel, a uniformity of approach across the country. So they would like to say, this one's 20, that's 30, that's 40. Sorry, no.
All right. So, yeah, indeed. So that's advice that we need to take on board. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what we've got to is a position where, we can see that people would love to be able to consider whether 30 would be a safer speed than 40, but we've received some advice that says that there are certain things we can and can't do under in the environment that we're in, and there's limited resource if we were to get you to do what actually amounts to a whole body of work that would remove resource from other projects. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. I'm desperately trying to find a way through this that allows us to do something that progresses we want to have a conversation about whether 30 is a better speed than 40 outside schools, that doesn't have any unintended effects or involve passing a resolution that you're not able to deliver on. And there are some conversations going on around that at the moment. Yeah. So coming back to questions, Tim, you're happy? So then I've got Aaron and then Sarah.
So just going back to number 2, can we not request NZTA to allow us to have our variable speed limit set at 30k? So we just write and ask if we can have a blanket rule across our entire district that we can go 30k and be consistent. So can we just write and ask? We can get a no letter back, but ask for that. It would be very odd for them to go against their own direction. So we would just write to NZTA requesting that our variable speed be set at 30k an hour.
So our advice,
and the Minister.
the advice from Ian is that to make that decision today without any advice from staff may be in breach of the decision-making requirements under the Local Government Act. So that actually to make a decision without any advice around that decision may be in breach of sections within the LGA.
Yep.
So that again speaks to a possible future workshop or referring the matters raised in item 2 to a committee or something of that nature.
Which advice from staff would that be? Because staff have told us many times, especially with the central core zone, how much safer 30k an hour is.
But in the course of your decision making under the LGA, you have to weigh up the costs and benefits, or the advantages and disadvantages. You've got no advice around the costing, is what we're hearing from our staff.
Yeah, the inflation adjusted cost of a life's I think $3.5 million now.
Yeah, yes, but those are the things you'd weigh up. You'd get the benefits and you'd get the costs. So this is just the legal advice around the decision making.
All right. Yep.
Possibly approve the speed limit of 30k, subject to approval from NZTA.
I mean, again, we've had advice on that already that suggests that wouldn't be the way forward. We need to find a way through this. I mean, if we are not going to be comfortable, approving this 40k, I mean, it's interesting that, you know, the community board are recommending that we approve 40k in this instance, but we advocate for 30. So if we were to say we're not willing to approve 40, we want it to be 30, that's going further than the community board were going anyway. Sarah, and then Anne, I'll come to you next.
Okay, so there's two things now that Ian's popped up with some advice there. So process-wise, Ian, if we were to go with, so the bottom number 2 there now, which is different to the board's original number 2, so that we request New Zealand Transport Agency review the variable school speed zones with a view of reducing it to 30 kilometres an hour. As a part of that review process, they would be asking for input from councils, at which point we would get advice for a submission on that. If we were just asking them to review it, not saying that we were advocating for it, do you think that would be acceptable?
Yes, I do.
Excellent.
I think that would just get it over the line.
Yep.
All you're doing is asking for a review.
That's
You're
right.
adopting the 40k.
Yep. So adopting the board resolution for number 1,
yep,
and doing an alternate number 2, requesting that NZTA review it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'd like to move that.
Great, thank you. So now we're moving on. That's good.
And I'll second that because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Excellent. Okay, good. I mean, that was wording I suggested a little while ago, and we did receive some advice around what the consequences of that might be, but we can let the thing run its course, and then obviously whatever the result of that piece of work is may give us some further decisions that we need to make at that time.
They have lots of amazing staff, and they will hire consultants, and they'll do a whole range of things.
Indeed. Yeah, all right, that's great. So, still in questions, Phil? No?
Simply going to say that I'm happy to move we have a workshop, please.
So we've now got moved and seconded. What we have got in blue on the screen. Are you wanting to move something different than that as a foreshadowed
well, I guess
motion, or are you wanting to add something by way of amendment, or are you happy with what we've now got there?
It's not needed.
I think it would be useful for us to be clear on the facts, and one way might be to have a workshop on it, but if the rest of, it's up to the rest of council, really.
We could take it offline and not as part of the resolution. We could do that seriously.
We'll see.
As you wish. I mean, you're perfectly entitled to foreshadow a further motion or move an amendment if you wish.
I think just for clarity, I would like it to stay on, so in fact we have the workshop. That's all part of this process.
So number 3, request a workshop on the matter, a workshop of the ITI committee or the council.
Can I just ask, if we're deciding to just ask for a review anyway, we would end up doing maybe a workshop and things later down the track if NZTA decided that it's something that they were going to look at. But staff were really concerned about adding to workload when they had other priorities, and I think that organising a workshop on this when we don't have to do any work on it right now might just add to staff workload in an area that we don't really need to.
All right, so we're now kind of debating an amendment that hasn't actually been put yet. What do you want to do? Do you want to proceed with this, or?
I'm not wanting want to add any pressure to the current staff workload, I'm happy just that we leave it.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you know, if the committee decided they wanted to have a workshop at some point in the future, then they could, and there might be a question as to when the appropriate time for that was. Okay, great. So are there any further questions? Great. Okay, so we've now got a resolution which has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on this? Yanni.
I just can't support this at 40k, and I'm really concerned about this proposal. I think we really need traffic lights at this intersection. This is going to be a major school drop-off and pick-off point, and unfortunately, because of the geographic constraints of where the school's located on the new park, it means that the pick-off and drop-off is quite far away from where the school entrance is, and I'm really concerned about the traffic that goes through here. So councillors have previously said that, you know, heavy vehicles can use ring routes and all that stuff. Ferry Road, Main Road, is an over-dimensioned route. It is not physically possible to narrow it down to constrain heavy vehicles for over-dimensioned purposes, which makes it really difficult to get those slow speed environments. But, you know, the staff have tried that through this process without the traffic lights. But I still just really concerned that you're going to have a really bad combination of speed of traffic, school pick-off and drop-off, and a crossing facility that isn't an ideal location. So I appreciate all the work that's gone on to this, but I can't support this. I think the speed's too high and the design is not close enough to the school.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. And thank you to the staff for this, and it is a really a frustration, I suppose, for you guys, but I do support 30Ks in front of schools. It will be good to have a look at it. I will support this today. But, you know, we talk about traffic, etc., and if we're going to go to look at schools and risk, those on the hills when trucks coming down, Dyers Pass Road, if you look at Dyers Pass Road, it is the main thoroughfare, and the backup to the Sumner Road, which has been closed for 8 years, and Gibby's Pass, which has been used. But here's a school on a hill that is the Dyers Pass Road. If you look at those roads, is the B road. Heckthorne Road was always designed as the main road, but the Dyers Pass Road is the main road. So if we're going to look at the environment of schools and their safety and their risk, I think that we've got to make a priority of those schools, both Cashmere and Mount Pleasant, because there is, I think, a greater risk on the hills with the angles involved. So I'm going to look forward to the workshop and also the discussion with NZTA and the Minister as well, because if the government is saying that we are wanting safety and it's a priority, but NZTA saying, oh, well, you know, it's just a wee bit awkward, well then who's actually driving their bus? Thank you.
Phil.
Look, I'm happy to support all these recommendations now. I think it's important that we support them. The Community Board asked us to do this. If we don't support the 40K, unfortunately, it seems to me nothing would happen, and that, in effect, makes the kids more unsafe. I'm very keen to, when we can, to reduce the speed for outside schools to 30K. Clearly, there's a complicated process to do that, and clearly there's always a cost, including workload. So I think I think we're getting somewhere though where we will be working collaboratively with staff, and so in fact we can get the best outcome. It certainly has to be achievable, and the step today though we have to take is to pass the 40K at this stage.
Thank you. Mike and then Sarah.
Thanks. I'll be supporting this, and I guess a lot of the stuff that was happening in the top part of the resolution got lost in the conversation around the 30Ks, which is a bit of a shame. But I'll focus on 30Ks as well because it's actually really, really important. And I guess it's a shame that, you know, we're having the conversation here right now. It should be right now being had by NZTA. All the evidence shows that actually you reduce the speed, the likelihood of death and serious injury drops dramatically. And not only that, the stopping distance also drops, so therefore the collision may not happen to start with. And the most at-risk group is children under 14. So if we've got the opportunity to actually reduce school speed zones to 30 Ks, we need to make sure we take it. And I really hope that NZTA listen to this, and I'd say they'll be getting the same message from a lot of councils around the country, but it's time for them, especially when you look at what the GPS now states, to actually change this. I mean, yes, there's going to be a cost to doing it, but what is the cost of to the loss of a child, you know, and the cost of the serious injuries? It's absolutely huge, and so therefore we need to make sure that we do the right thing. So this is the first step, but it needs to be pushed along.
Thank you. Sarah.
I want to go last to wrap it up, so if someone else wants to speak.
Yep, okay, great. So we'll come to you at the end. So Aaron and then Glenn. Aaron.
Yeah, mine's really quick. It's mainly around number 2, and that is the sooner the entire country gets their variable speed limit around schools to 30k, and all schools at 30k, will make a lot more sense for all drivers, knowing every time you pass a school you're doing 30k an hour. It just makes sense. Canterbury's road toll's gone up 30% in the last 2 years, so every step we can take towards reducing that is a good step.
Thank you. Glenn.
At this point in time, I sense ideally we would all like 30, but because of that, if we voted against this, this stays at 50. We've heard of it's kind of, I think it's a logarithmic equation over the death rates. The higher and the lower the speeds are. The NZTA has good data on this, and for instance, one piece of information is $1.4 million social cost over a child's lifetime if they lose a leg at a young age. So there will be a lot of real and financial and social costs and benefits which the NZTA already have. So if we don't have the capacity to do this work, let's get it from them and then make a good decision at that time. But I do take the process risk question. We've got to go with 40 at this point, but perhaps one day with a view to actually landing on 30.
I'm happy to support what's in front of us today, although it's been an interesting discussion because I'm really getting a sense that most people around this table would love to at least be able to see the results of a piece of work that would tell us whether 30 is actually a more appropriate speed limit outside schools than 40. And the difficulty of this discussion this morning has been finding the best way to get that discussion happening. And in the back of my mind, we've got a LGNZ conference coming up, and I'm wondering whether this is a conversation we might want to have with representatives of other councils around the country, quite possibly by way of a LGNZ remit. And I've just highlighted that to Mary now, and it's something that may be able to come up through that process. But yeah, I mean, we all, I think it's fair to say, want the safest environments around our schools we possibly can. Traffic and schools is an interesting combination at the best of times. Traffic going faster than it need to around schools makes that combination even more interesting and even more dangerous, and that point's been made very, very well. But I think in terms of what we've got in front of us today, approving the 40k school zone is definitely better than not approving it, because that means we would leave that road at 50k's. We've already talked about the additional heavy traffic which is going to be using Sumner Road, which regardless of whether it goes onto the ring road or not, will be going through this part of the road corridor before it gets to the ring road. So we're looking at an increased amount of heavier traffic on that road. It's important that we do something rather than doing nothing. 40k is what's in front of us today, and we've heard that to substitute the 40 for 30 isn't something that we would be able to do without additional advice, which inevitably would take time and would divert resources from other projects that are also very important to us. So I think what we've got here is sensible to approve today, but I think to be requesting NZTA to do that review is also perfectly sensible, and to be thinking of other ways that we might be able to support by maybe working with LGNZ is another a good consideration. So I'm happy to support this today, realising that in an ideal world we might far rather have gone to 30k rather than 40. Sarah, I'll come back to you to close the debate.
Thank you very much. As board members around the city, we constantly hear from our communities about safety concerns around schools, whether it's to do with parents parking and double parking, speeds around schools, near misses and actual accidents. And there are two key parts to this. So one is the local school who have come to us, done deputations in the past about school safety. And if we don't, it's very clear that if we don't have these provisions in place by the beginning of this next year, this school will not be allowed to open on its new site. It is part of the consent conditions that they have this in place for the school to open. I had concerns at the board because actually residents from Celia Street and Beachville Road have approached us in the past saying, please turn our streets permanently 30 kilometres an hour because that's what they're designed for. And my preference was to turn 2 of these streets where the variable signs are going to 40 actually to 30, but there's not enough time to do that before the school's due to open, and the school being open is the priority. So I think that work will happen in the future, which will be really good. We have looked at a range of different things, including traffic lights for the Beachville corner. We've looked at the location of the pedestrian crossing. And one of the key things for pedestrian safety getting to the school from around the corner in McCormick's Bay and Balmoral Hill has been the reinstatement of the Moabone Cave footpath, which was not going to happen initially because of rockfall risk, and a reassessment asked for by the board of the risk after the work had taken place showed that actually it was possible to put the footpath back. However, the geotech staff are not comfortable with the students standing waiting in front of there, but happy enough with them passing on the footpath, which is why the footpaths, the pedestrian crossing is slightly further away than we would have liked. The other thing is the 30 kilometre an hour speed, variable speed limits for schools. And I think that having NZTA do that work is an ideal place for it. It's where it sits, and I'm sure that they've started work on that already. I said my pieces on that much earlier as part of very long questions, so I won't continue, but I'm really pleased to be able to get this through today.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? So I'll put 1 and 2 separately. No. So in blue is what we're... So let's delete the other so that it's absolutely clear what we're doing. All right. So what we've got in front of us, so I'll put 1 and 2 separately. So clauses under item 1. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? So Yanni, you're voting against. So if we can record that, please. And item 2, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much.